Welcome to the Gods of Tomorrow podcast, where we discuss religious deconstruction, secular humanism, political activism, and epistemology. Together, we explore how to solve human problems with human solutions. We deconstruct, we activate, and then most importantly, we live our fucking lives. I am your host, Josh Raw, and you are the Gods of Tomorrow. All right. Let's do this shit. Welcome back, everybody. It is episode 19 of Gods of Tomorrow. I'm Josh Raw. You can call me Josh. And just a really quick reminder that faith is when you're believing things that don't rely on common sense. So if you need to believe the improbable, the impossible, that's when you lean on faith. And so just a little quick reminder that that is out there. Now, for those of you that have been listening for a while, I like to bring on guests from time to time. And today we have an awesome guest, Heretical Dan. You may know him from TikTok. Very excited to have you here with me, Dan. How you doing, man?
Doing pretty good. Not bad today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Every day is a busy day, and I keep taking on more projects that I can't handle, and so that's always a struggle.
Oh yeah, I know. Spring's here. We just moved and we're trying to get the garden, all together, and it's a big project because we're trying to like make it huge, but we're also like, hey, we're getting older, so let's do all raised beds so that as we get older, we don't have to worry about all getting on your knees and all that other stuff.
Well, you're still one step further than me. My wife and I always talk about doing a garden, and I think one year we did it, and it was maybe 3 weeks in, we were like, yeah, fuck this. Let it go. I'm going back to the store, the farmer's market. I'm going to buy stuff. Like, I'm not putting in the effort, but...
less of it's like, gardens are one of those things. If you're not into it, don't do it. It is like, if it's not a hobby to you, you really shouldn't do it. Just becomes work.
Yeah, and I don't have a green thumb, but by any means. Now, you and I have been bouncing around the same circle for a while on TikTok. Yeah. I probably watch your videos probably more often than almost anybody's because I just love your approach and love your style in addressing issues and also responding to the hey Christians. But if you don't mind, you've probably shared this story before. I would love to know what brought you into Christianity and what brought you out and what that journey has looked like for you.
Yeah. Okay. So, one, it's a long one because of the fact that I was raised into Christianity. Many people, obviously, in America have been raised into it. Mm-hmm. I was raised in the branch of Charismatic. So if for those of you that don't know Charismatic, right, it is basically the Pentecostal branch. Mm-hmm. Right? You got the Pentecostal, it branches off into Charismatic. And from Charismatic, you have the prosperity message, which I don't know if it is, but it was one of the largest growing branches of Christianity before the pandemic.
Really?
It was huge.
I come from,
in the world, not just America.
And I come from Methodist, and then I was a Baptist preacher. When I was in my young adulthood. So I'm not real familiar with what the prosperity message is. Is there something specific to that in the charismatic church?
So with charismatic, there's several teachings. One, God wants you healed. He wants you to have a pretty much a good life. He wants you to be wealthy within means. So charismatic is not the prosperity message fully. Mm-hmm. Charismatic still has some of those reserves, like, hey, you can still be in sin if you have money. You gotta be careful. Mm-hmm. But it also recognizes that you can be rich and it's fine. It relies upon positive confessions. If you say certain things, right, you could be opening the door to the devil, or you could be opening the door to God's blessings. So there's a positive confession, a negative confession. And so we'll get more into that. But so this kind and so oh yeah, and then getting drunk in the spirit. They really like kind of pushed that forward in the 80s and the 90s
Mm-hmm.
of people just getting drunk in the spirit, holy laughter, or holy rollers, or I forget that there's many other terms that they have, but I
Hmm.
was raised in that as if that was a very normal thing, right? Um, and me and my family, my earliest memories were growing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Mm-hmm.
and right in the Bible Belt. Rhema is a church slash Bible training center out there in Broken Arrow, and my mom attended that school, and it's just like a 2 year thing. And during that time, got introduced to I was 4 and 5 to 6, right around that time. Uh, got introduced to like Christianity in a big way. You had like Oral Roberts University that was there. I think we were going to a Victory Church nearby.
Mm.
Um, and well, Oral Roberts also, they have this big campus, right? And so at the time they had what's called the City of Faith, and it was a hospital. It was the only like, I guess, spirit-filled hospital at the time, where the doctors were spirit. I don't know. I don't know too much about it,
That's interesting.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but and so the whole campus it is pretty cool when you go there, because like the City of Faith is kind of further out. I believe they lost that building because of
Mm-hmm.
bankruptcy and stuff. But the 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 building is like uh as long as the Noah's Ark is. That's how tall it is, and they have a second building of the width, and then there's a third building of like the depth or something like that. Yeah, it's just like it is. When you kind of go in there, it's like, oh, this is kind of a cool campus. Weird, 'cause everything looks pretty futuristic in
So
a
is
way.
this like a medical campus, or is it like an educational campus, or is it
And
primarily for like spiritual, residential? Like, what are we talking
so
about?
it is an actual university.
Okay.
It's not just not like Bible college. So you can go there and you can get your degree
Mm-hmm.
in medicine and other stuff. I don't fully know. I was kind of looking into it when I was a young adult, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't take it too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my mom worked at the City of Faith as a nurse. So she was going to school at Rhema, went and was a nurse at the Oral Roberts hospital there. So yeah, and we went to like concerts. They had the Maybe Center, which had like this huge auditorium where
Mm-hmm.
Christian concerts all the time. So it was, I can't say that it was a bad time. It was a good time. I was a kid, so
Yeah, I was gonna
but
say
there's
I've been spending a lot of time lately, like just looking at the indoctrination of children themselves and the amount of time that they spend within like those communities and those establishments and the scriptures that are pressed on you, and then like the
yeah,
reward and punishment systems that are built up around those to kind of keep you locked in. And it's
yeah.
interesting because I look back on my own childhood and time spent at like Awanas or at
Hmm,
Sunday
hmm.
school, and they're positive. Like I like the people
Yeah,
and I like the environment, but then I go back and I scrutinize about what was going on there, and it's like, well,
sure.
you guys were feeding me a lot of shit and
Hmm.
making me feel guilty when I didn't accept your worldview.
Yeah. So there's, going into some of that, as I said, like there's not a lot bad. If I to do, kind of look at the bad though, I would say it is some of the teachings that were hard on me.
Mm-hmm.
The teaching of hell. That is a very difficult process for a young kid to go through. Of God's loving, yet there's this place that we could all go to if we don't love him back. Okay, okay.
Mm-hmm.
uh, um, there's also like I call it demon anxiety, right? Because you're taught at a young age, like, hey, if you do something bad, the devil could come in and get you, or a demon could get in and mess with your life and hurt you, or something bad might happen. So you gotta get build up this anxiety of, oh man, if I'm, when nobody's looking, a demon could be looking and it could get me. You know, you also kind of build up this thing where God could possibly hurt you through some of the Old
Mm-hmm.
Testament, teachings. You think about Jonah and the whale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the fish, whatever. Or some people say fish, but anyway. And he didn't do what God said. Oh, he got swallowed by a whale
Mm-hmm.
or a big fish. but
Do you remember how old
and
you were
so
when you started hearing those things, like about hell and God's potential wrath and
yeah,
demons?
4 or 5, 6. I remember all that stuff, and you hear it over and over and over again because you essentially are in that same uh the same teachings as you go progress through the children's um Sunday schools, going
Mm-hmm.
on to like junior high youth group, to high school youth group.
Mm-hmm.
Like those stories just continue, they don't stop. So I often look back at it and I'm like, man, horror movies were just so much more real to me now, than now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because now I can watch a horror movie. It's just like, oh yeah, it's fun, it's kind of entertaining, and it's fake.
Yeah.
But back when I was, a Christian, I was like, dude, this could be real,
Mm-hmm.
or I could be hurt because I'm watching this right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really straddling the line there.
Yeah. I, I don't want you to like completely like go off helter skelter, but I'm kind of interested because I too know what you're talking about. I've suffered from things like sleep apnea and things like that. And when I was a
Okay.
Christian, it was like Satan's after me and the devil's
Yeah.
after me and demons are after me because you have
Yeah.
hypnagogic hallucinations and you see stuff and it's really hard to like
Yeah.
understand what's happening, and so you start to like have this association of this is due to my sin. Because I've sinned, I'm now being attacked by demons in my sleep, and I have to set myself right in order to overcome these things. And then you realize it's like, oh no, it's just because I drank caffeine before I went to bed, and it's because
Right.
I didn't sleep well the night before. So after several nights of that, now I'm experiencing this on day 4. But you start
Hmm.
making these connections between things that don't exist, and you start seeing things in your life as really being dark and evil. But then when
Hmm.
you're on the other side of the fence into like atheism from Christianity,
Yeah.
like there's that fear is not attached to it. That fear is almost gone.
No.
It's like, oh, this is just like a story, or this is just
Yeah.
a medical thing that I can do X, Y, and Z, and it goes away.
Yeah. That relief, it is like this burden that does come off you once you kind of fully start going through that process of deconstructing your faith and what you've.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wait, you're like, oh wait a minute. I'm not afraid of these spiritual things because I don't have proof that they're actually real to begin with. So, why would I be upset about this?
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh man, look, now demons are not after me. The church is not after me because the church has their own minions or little police
Mm-hmm.
officers of spiritual. What are you doing? And God is not after me, who says
Mm-hmm.
that he's loving, but yet he might test me. He might put me through something. This is just life, and there's just good
Mm-hmm.
things that happen and good things and bad things that happen. You know,
And,
and so it brings it so it's a little bit more simple. To in my eyes now, it's just like, yeah, bad things happen, good things happen. That's the
mm-hmm.
way it is. You know.
And the mental gymnastics of making allowances for why things happen the way they do, I think, is also one of
Yeah.
the big relieving pieces. I'm no longer trying to rationalize why God is wrathful. I no longer have to rationalize why Satan's attacking me or trying to figure out what thing I should be feeling guilty or shameful about. It's now like
Sure.
this kind of rolling with the punches and taking things as they come and finding those logical
Hmm.
conclusions for it. And I don't know, that
Yeah.
deep seated feeling of like something's wrong
Hmm.
disperses And not
Yeah.
overnight. Not overnight, obviously. It takes a long time to find that sense of peace again. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I remember when I was a teenager, just going through like different things that I thought were demonic and like spiritual situations. And one could definitely like that went through my situations would have said like, "Oh yeah, that's real. That's totally 100% real," because I felt that way, and other people that were experiencing with me felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, it is like this: you you learn something that could happen, and then when you're in those moments of like, oh, there's possibly something going on here, your mind is ready to attack
Yeah.
because that's you're trained to be a spiritual warrior for
Mm-hmm.
Christ,
Yep.
right? Like you're going to be doing the things Jesus was doing,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and the disciples were doing, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
I'm
the whole thing,
casting out
but the
demons
whole
and I'm
spiel,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
So and at the end of the day, you're like, oh, it really was just like my mind, not, I wouldn't say it's just mind playing tricks on you, but it's definitely the mind that's just prepared to do what you need to do to
Mm-hmm.
survive. It's very much like a survival thing because if you get it wrong, like they kind of teach you like you're gonna get attacked, you're gonna get
Mm-hmm.
messed up. I think they I remember the one story that was told to me, and then in the book of Acts, these two guys, I forget their names, and they decided, hey, we're gonna go and cast out a demon out of this person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know the person's name. It was just some random thing because they saw Paul do it or something. And so they go up to this demon possessed person. They go, "We cast you out in the name of Jesus that Paul teaches about." And the demon looks at him. The demon possessed person looks at him and says, "I know, I know Paul, and I know Jesus, but I don't know you." And he beat the two wannabes up. But then but you're told that story as, hey, you better be prepared because Jesus ain't going to save you in that moment. Paul's not going to save you in that moment. You better know what you're doing before you start
Mm-hmm.
messing with the demon. You know. So yeah,
Yeah.
you definitely kind of prepared to to jump in there. Otherwise, you're going to get your ass kicked or something.
Yeah. I'm really, and I'm interested in getting back in your story, but it's fascinating to me
Sure.
how when you get away from that place of survival with your brain, where you're looking for demons and darkness and devils around every corner, that
Yeah.
now you're on the other side of that, and you look back at those instances where you carried such fear and such concern, and were walking on
Hmm.
eggshells, worried about your spiritual welfare, and then
Yeah.
now you look back and you go, what in the world was I even doing? Like, why was I making these weird connections, and why was I believing this? And
Yeah.
now, of course, you'll have Christians come in your comments, which I've seen them do, and say, well, of course, now you're not experiencing that because the devil has you.
Right. Right. Yeah. Exactly. And or I was never saved to begin with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, what did I experience that whole time? Like it, it just doesn't when you look at all that and you're like, man, the assumptions that people make, it's just like you have to uh, um, demote me in what I'm saying. You have to put me down
Mm-hmm.
because if what I'm saying is true, that's really scary to you, and I understand that that is a very, very frightening thing
Mm-hmm.
to have to like face.
Mm-hmm.
That there's this group of people that have deconstructed from the religion, and they're trying to warn you,
Mm-hmm.
not because they're spiteful towards you or God.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're being an asshole, yeah, but but we don't want to see you go through what we had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to see you continue to go down the same path because it didn't end up well. I mean, people that were very devoted. I was very
Mm-hmm.
devoted to my beliefs. Somebody came up to me with a gun and said, are you willing to believe willing to die for God? Yes, I will die gladly.
Yeah.
Gladly, I will die. Yes,
Uh,
I was
yeah.
I was in that mode.
I was too,
So
man. I
many
remember
many people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I remember talking to my own family about that. Like my kids when they were really young, being like, if somebody comes in my house with a gun and threatens to shoot all of this, I will let him because I know we'll go to heaven and he still needs a chance to repent for the crime he just committed. Like it was at
Yeah.
such a level of like just
Yeah.
insanity. Being like, I need to try to save everyone I can, and I already know that we're all saved, so I'm not worried about what happens to us if we die for God.
Yep. Right.
Uh,
Right. Yeah. Crazy stuff. But like being taught that at a young age, with charismatic, I mean, it kind of goes on another level too.
mm-hmm.
And so the guy who founded Rhema is Kenneth Hagen.
Okay.
Kenneth Hagen. Okay. And so he's really kind of the start of a lot of the prosperity message. Kenneth Copeland. He was a mentor of Copeland's.
Okay.
Um, and I really enjoyed Hagen. I did never enjoyed Copeland. I could never wrap my brain around what Copeland is trying to say
Mm-hmm.
when he's preaching. It's like I'm always like sitting there like, what is he trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't get it. Am I even saved? Because there's other people around me that are getting this. They think he's this great guy. I don't get him at all. But anyway, Hagen wrote a book about how to like some type of like how-to book on how to cast out demons or how to deal with demons. And it was like this real mystical type of book. Kind of a cool read in a way because of all the stories that are within it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I read that and I was like, oh man, this crazy stuff. At age 13, I think I was 12 or 13, I read it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember like reading the stories and just like hearing all the different things that that he did and had experience. I was like, man, I don't mind that. Let's do that, And so again, like that kind of indoctrination of like reading those type of material, that
Mm-hmm.
type of material. Yeah, of course, I went through what I went through and experienced what I experienced.
Mm-hmm.
You know, believing that I'm seeing a demon with friends that are there and they're seeing the same, then they say they see the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
We cast them out. You know, and many times it happened when we were kind of talking about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we would start talking about like different situations we've heard from other friends, and then all of a sudden we're seeing a demon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, are we trying to connect the dots here? Like why are we automatically seeing this demon out
Mm-hmm.
of nowhere? Because we're talking about all these situations. We're hyping each other up.
Yeah, I'm trying to find this
Like
article that I know about, and I'm not finding it off the quick search here as we're chatting. But there's been some interesting research in like why some people hear God's voice and how our bottom up processes work with perceptions. And when you
okay.
have this perception that meets with what your intention is or what you expect to see, it starts
Yeah.
essentially formulating not only audio but also visual hallucinations, auditory as well, that you start kind of having in front of you. And this can be shared among groups of people who have all those
Sure.
same connections between the two to start formulating things that we're all now seeing and hearing this thing in front of us, especially if you all
Hmm.
come from the same culture or the same upbringing
Yeah.
or the same teachings. You start having
Mm.
these shared hallucinations. Um,
Yeah.
it's fascinating stuff.
So yeah, that is actually really fascinating. Hmm. That's cool. What I the other day I was thinking about like people that I've seen demon possessed, right?
Mm-hmm.
In like at church services. And I'm thinking about, I was like thinking about, man, those individuals must have had some type of mental health disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Like that they went and they started doing those things. And like because some of those people I never saw in the church before. And all of a sudden they're there and they're doing those things. What if that person just kind of came off the streets and just walked in? They're having some mental health issues. And all of a sudden, all these people are just, laying hands on them
Yeah.
and how embarrassing for them too. Like not I don't mean that in a sarcastic way, I mean that in a I feel for that person in regards of how embarrassing that situation could have been for them, that they went away after going through this mental health situation and remembering what just happened from all those people and thinking, man, am I really demon possessed?
Yeah.
Like why did that happen?
And if you
Like
study
and
the,
then
as I say, if you study the science behind it too, when they're suddenly healed in that
yeah.
moment, there's endorphins and oxytocin that's pushed throughout the brain from the physical touch and the excitement, and if there's music
Yeah.
playing as well, that essentially brings down those levels of cortisol in the brain and gives you like this almost sense of high and feeling good that
Mhm.
gives the
Yeah.
perception of a miracle occurring or a miracle taking place, and then
Yeah.
it will
Yep.
wear down after hours, and
Yeah.
then it's like, well,
Right.
it didn't
And
work.
right, and you notice that when preachers, if they know what they're doing well,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and evangelists, if when they take the back of the person's head and lay hands like this,
Mm-hmm.
you know that they're doing something well.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you do that and do this, that's a pressure point right here.
Yeah.
And when pressure's applied, there's a release of this.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of like that built up pressure, sinus pressures, and all that. It
Mm-hmm.
kind of gets released. There's one of the face massage techniques is
Yeah.
right there.
Mm-hmm.
Putting your palm and put it right there and pressing.
Yeah.
Like but just somebody doing that sensation, it feels very good.
Yeah.
So, and when getting drunk in the spirit and stuff like that, getting laid hands on, somebody do that, and then you have your eyes closed. Oh, it feels so good. You fall backwards.
Well, I
It
don't know if
does
you,
feel good.
I don't know if you know about me, but I worked in a psych ward for years. I mean,
Mhm.
I've seen people have psychotic episodes where their eyes go completely black almost. I mean, it appears that way because the eyes get so dilated and just
Yeah,
behaviors that you would typically believe to be demonic possession in many ways. But they really
sure.
are psychotic breaks that you can treat and that you can respond to and that go away
Hmm.
on their own by responding to it appropriately. And it's so hard to convince those that believe they've seen demon possessed that it's really just a state of the human condition that some people happen to be in that are just having a
Yeah,
breakdown. And it's I don't know how much you saw this in your churches where people were really having these moments that they were being healed.
yeah.
And I don't know how often is
Oh yeah.
I've not been in a charismatic church before, but is it ever with individuals that are actually part of the church that come back and are still suffering from the same afflictions that they were healed from the week prior or 2 weeks ago?
Right.
Or is it always a person
The,
on the street? Is it always a person that's just like out on the street being brought in?
when those healings would happen, there was like small healings that would happen quite often in within the church. And people would have claims of, I remember this blind girl in her church who claimed that she started to see at one point, and then she got her blindness back.
Because
And
of
then looking
sin?
back, I don't know. No,
Okay.
they didn't necessarily say that.
Okay.
I was surprised. I was actually surprised, but this is kind of further. This was at the time where things, when it hit about like 2005,
Mm-hmm.
that concept was starting to weed itself out a little bit out of the church. It goes in waves. I'll just say that it goes in waves. But and she was so young too that I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that they really would do that. There was a thing where I think people were saying like, "What's going on with the parents?" Because that was more of the thing. Like if a child's not getting healed because their guardian is the spiritual leader, they could be getting inflicted because of them if they're not doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But she didn't get it. She claimed that she got her healing, and that she could see kind of some things. But it was one of the it was it's one of those things where it's like, did she just say that in the moment because she didn't keep it?
Mm-hmm.
And why if God why would God give this just little trickle of healing and then take it back?
Yeah.
Right? That does make sense. So yeah, um, you know, one of the things I kind of open my eyes was the was to healing. Why haven't I ever seen a person who's an amputee
Mm-hmm.
get their leg or arm back? Why don't we see something like that? Why don't we see, like, deformities shaped back,
Mm-hmm.
into their original form? So
It's
I
always it's.
never,
Sorry, I was gonna say it's
it,
always unseen afflictions that are healed,
yeah,
things that you cannot measure.
right. Or it's a slow healing that actually the doctor healed the person, not God,
Mm-hmm.
because they were taking medicine. And how many doctors have gotten the shaft because of God?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the medical team, and you know
Yeah. Now, I remember the prayer lists that were always at my church, where we're praying for everyone and anyone for all sorts of things going on, from some lady's cancer to somebody needing their crops to grow that particular summer. And every
yeah.
time that it worked, it was because of the power of prayer. And every time it didn't work, it
Hmm.
was because it was God's will.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so growing up, it's different in charismatic. They have this thing where they almost don't like the will of God.
Really?
Yeah, they don't. It's God is in control, but when it comes to certain things on earth, it becomes this thing where you're in control. And so it's really strange. It's almost like God is a genie. And so
Okay.
it becomes this thing where it's not necessarily God's will. Definitely more so in prosperity message.
Mm-hmm.
Charismatic, not so much, but definitely prosperity message. And even Kenneth Copeland's wife, Gloria. She got up and said, "Don't ever pray the will of God for me." What a weak prayer.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. It was God. We already know the will of God, and that is that He wants us healed and whole. So
Mm-hmm.
don't say, like. So they're basically saying, what they're really kind of saying is, we already know the will of God, so don't pray as if it's a let's pray, and by chance
Mm-hmm.
it will go 50-50. That's what they're saying, but they kind of say it in this really crude way when they say it. It's not very nice. And um they say, God wants you healed and whole. If you're lying sick on your deathbed, God can't use you. God can't use you if you're
Hmm.
sick. God can't use you if you're poor. God needs you healed. God needs you rich. God needs you prospering in order to use you. So it's like this thing where if you're not up to that standard, God can't use you. And it's kind of sick when you kind of boil it down like that too. Is
It's
how many people are dealing with horrible things on this earth,
yeah.
and you're telling them you're no good. You're telling them you're no good because you have this thing, and because you're not healed yet, it's your fault.
It's so hard to wrap my head around that concept. And I know it's because I wasn't raised in it, so I wasn't indoctrinated into it. But I think of things like Romans 12:1 that tells you to be a living sacrifice, which essentially
Hmm.
says give up your free will to accept God's will so that you're living for
Yeah.
God and only God, because that's what gets you into heaven. And then to
Hmm.
think that they're telling you that the reason you're not prosperous is because you're not healed, you're not sinful, you're not taking action in the way that you're supposed to take,
Hmm.
and you need to work yourself into a place of prosperity in order
Right.
to do God's work through your own free will. Is that what I'm understanding?
Pretty much, yeah. And that's more prosperity message. Charismatic is a little bit nicer about it, but when it came to that shift of going into the prosperity message, I wasn't really on board. I think I was like 25 at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew all these charismatics that were switching over to prosperity message, and I was like, I don't get it. I don't understand it. Like, um, we and I knew this through my teaching from Rhema. Was look at King Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't ask for riches, he asked for wisdom, and then he got the riches.
Mm-hmm.
you know so us praying for riches and stuff like that just doesn't make any sense. you know
So,
how do you maintain your riches if you don't have wisdom? How do you maintain your
mm-hmm.
stuff if you don't have wisdom? So that was a good concept that I learned, through the church. Yeah, I don't think everything in the Bible is bad. I just it's just that twisting. It's just the twisting of these you know these concepts of Christianity, and really twist them to build up a narrative that's actually very selfish and horrible on many people. And the hurtful things that have happened throughout the generations.
I,
There's always some good in everything, but man, there's a lot of shit in Christianity.
you mentioned something earlier about confession, and I was hoping you could explore that a little bit. Because when you say confession, I think of Catholicism and having a
Yeah.
confessional with a pastor or priest. But I was, of course, raised in churches where there wasn't really such thing as a confession. I mean, you prayed to God, and we had
Yeah.
long sermons about how you no longer needed a priest to confess to,
Mhm.
and that you now have that
Yeah.
direct contact to God through Jesus. So, what does confession look like, and what does positive confession mean in the realm of prosperity?
So in Charismatic and Prosperity, they say that there's a positive confession that can um, can develop into this natural state. In the spiritual state, you already have it.
Mm-hmm.
God's already answered your prayer before you even asked it,
Okay.
right? So, and the answer is He already wants you healed. He already wants you prosperous. And charismatic, obviously, I said within certain reasons, but you know, um, the prosperity message would say no all the time, every time. And so you basically say, like, in the name of Jesus, I'm healed, like
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again. So this is kind of the where some of the stuff with my mom, and it was a little bit of a harder subject to talk about.
Okay.
So my mom went through all this stuff, right? And I come to find out years later, she had I can't totally confirm this, but I believe it's true. She had schizophrenia,
Mm-hmm.
and so she had some psychotic breakdowns and or bad experiences, either through drugs or something. And she was in a séance when she was younger,
Mm-hmm.
and she really believed that she got attacked by a demon in that séance. And so ever since then, from what I hear of my uncles, they said that she wasn't really quite the same after that. And so she started to go after religion, and then so she found Rhema. And when she found Rhema, she really gravitated towards a lot of the teachings. And one of the teachings, is the positive confession. So she would be casting out a demon over and over and over again in her room with the lights out when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
She would go through those cycles that many people kind of go through. And, she would spend hours in isolation, praying, casting out a devil, saying, I'm healed, all those kind of things. And she did that forever. She did that for a very, very long time and didn't really get what she was looking for in that. And she put a lot of her life stake into it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, and she she eventually did have a mental breakdown where she really believed that she was supposed to be being a traveling evangelist, kind of like Joyce Myers, and then and so that didn't pan out. She ended up isolating herself in her room for 6 months, uh, saying that she's praying, seeking God, and all that stuff, and she ended up having this mental breakdown. Well, in my family, she was kind of the spiritual pillar,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so, she went to college, very smart individual. She went to one of the universities in Chicago, was top of her class. Um, and so it was one of those very difficult things to see her downfall. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, I'm thinking in my head, what's happening right now? Because like, this is not what we've been taught. We,
Mm-hmm.
like we haven't been taught this. And she's now kind of like falling. Well, I guess she must be in sin because that's what we've been taught. If it doesn't work out, it's because you're in sin. And I'm like, man, I don't know how I can wrap my brain around that when you're isolated in your room doing nothing but praying,
Mm-hmm.
and all this stuff. And all of a sudden this happens. And again, that situation, my mom was never really the same after that. She was, gone for a month. And she was able to get herself into a battered women's shelter, even though my dad didn't beat her, you know. But because she was a nurse and everything, she was a very smart nurse and worked on a psych ward as well. She knew how to answer all the questions
Mm-hmm.
what they were asking her. She knew everything to say, and so she didn't look bad to everybody else until she had her secondary mental breakdown. But years later, I was talking to one of my brothers because that's been a perplexed thing, like how, mom was messed up and they it was hard for them to wrap their brain around mental health. And I'm coming from a small town. It was hard for me for quite a while too. So I understood it. And I said, why is it that, mom prayed and did all the right things, gave her money to the church, attended church, was seeking God to become this traveling evangelist. She really
Mm-hmm.
believed that she was going to be one, and all that, all the things that she did, she really, really tried really hard to be a good Christian. And, God just gave her the shaft. That can't be the way it is. So why can't we just say like, hey, mom had some pretty bad mental health issues. And, you know, because of the time that she was living in, 80s and 90s, you didn't want to bring that out. Being a woman at that time,
Mm-hmm.
she studied to be a nurse. How hard is it to say, hey, everybody, I have schizophrenia? You know, I mean, she would have lost her job.
Yeah.
She would have gone through a lot more stuff. I feel for her in that regard because it's like, it's too bad that there was a stigma hanging over everybody at that time about mental health. It, she had to hide it. And then because she hid it, she ended up having mental breakdowns.
If you don't mind me asking, how
You
was your family's response to that question? I mean, was there a reconciliation of like trying to?
my younger brother, I think my younger brother kind of understood it. I think he's still coming to terms with some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My older brother, not so, kind of, not so much. So
Mm-hmm.
he kind of had the spiritual thing where he still believes that she had a demon.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, where's your proof? Where's your proof for that? Like she had a mental health issue. That's what she had.
Yeah.
We have more proof of that than a demon,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So, um, from my knowledge, she told one of her brothers that she had schizophrenia, and he promised never to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so he didn't, for many, many years.
So is that the start of your turning away from Christianity and looking for other answers? Like, would you mark that as the start of your deconstruction? Is seeing how devout and faithful your mother was, and still wasn't finding the healing that she was seeking?
Yeah, that was definitely one of them. My deconstruction was like the cutting away, the slow cutting away, like you would a piece of meat or
Yeah.
something like that. Like Thanksgiving turkey, just shaving off those little pieces.
Mm-hmm. Uh, I, I relate with that. It's funny because people always tell you that you broke away because you wanted to sin, or they look at you leaving the church as just being a really like quick snap and gone type of thing. And
Yeah,
it's a consistent, continuous seeking of
right.
truth that you eventually
Yeah,
just can't find any more threads to hang on to.
right. Yep. So, yeah, I was, that was one thing. Um, hearing the church, I remember being in a at Rhema. I would go to winter Bible seminars, and they had healing school there,
Mm.
and so they teach you how to maintain or get your healing there. And so uh, I remember the preacher saying quite a bit. You got to take a step of faith. Stop believing what the doctor says and believe what God's word says. You're healed.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta stop, take that step of faith and stop taking your medication.
God, that hurts
stop
my
taking
heart.
stop taking your medication because it's a step of faith. God ain't gonna do nothing unless you do some steps of faith.
Mm-hmm.
God activates on faith. So um evidently, I don't know the full story, but I know of many stories of people hearing this type of preaching, and then they would stop taking their meds, and then uh, either they would, get hurt, have to go to the hospital, or they having like a mental breakdown, and some people even dying because they're believing in God. It's the same thing as the snake handlers.
Mm-hmm.
It's just in a different form. It's just in a different form, right? You get hit by the snake, and you believe God, and if you survive, then God has blessed you. If you don't, then you must have not been a real Christian.
Yeah.
So it becomes this thing where something happened, and we're sitting down, and the preacher comes up and starts teaching. He goes, you know what? There's something going on. I have to address. We never told you to stop taking your medications. But that's not something we teach here. We're trying to tell you guys to get healed from God and then stop taking your medications. We never told you to stop taking your medication. Get healed first. Then go to your doctor and ask if you can be off the meds. Because if you're healed, why would you take the meds in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so so it's just like I right away I was like, okay, that's a big red flag. I know for a fact that that is something that you guys taught.
Mm-hmm.
I turned a blind eye to it, like a good Christian I was,
Yeah.
you know, because that's what you're taught to do. You can't question your leaders because they're the ones that have to stand before God, not you on that.
Mm-hmm.
Hebrews. Let's say Hebrews. I think
Yeah.
13, chapter 13.
I'm like maintaining my composure here because I want to be so riled up about even this concept of preachers giving medical advice. I also get really frustrated about preachers giving counseling advice to individuals without having any really certification to be giving mental health counseling or marriage counseling or any type of counseling. Um,
Yeah.
and it frustrates me to all ends. And the folks that watch my show, they know that I'm a licensed social worker. They know I've been a therapist. They know I have a PhD. They know that I'm a
Mm.
hypnotherapist. They know that I'm a life coach certified. Like I've done a lot of different things in my life working with people that struggle in a variety of different areas. I've taught parenting classes. I've taught
Yeah.
child rearing classes. Like I've gone through
Mm.
the painful stakes of education and certification to be able to do all those things. And to think that we have leaders out there or people that are perceived leaders that are giving
Yeah.
directions that are harmful and hurtful to
Hmm.
humanity is so it just twists my heart into knots. It's awful to think that that's out there and people are being taken advantage of and manipulated, and it's killing people. It's literally killing
Yeah.
people.
Well, yeah. The what they'll there's even worse things that are being taught on that as well. And you can see it on some of well, I don't know if they do it as much now that they were doing it back in the 90s quite a bit and the early 2000s, but they would say, you know, God wants you healed, but you know, you got to take that step of faith and give into this ministry. Give into this ministry. You know, some of the stuff that you got holding on, you know, for you know, certain things, you know, you need to give that up and give that to God.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're holding it for something important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but and you want your healing. But you know, you got to give that to God first, and then you're going to get your healing. What they're alluding to is, you know, that the money that you're going to spend for hospital or medication.
Yeah, put it in the preacher's pocket.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, so we know there's definitely stories out there of people just dying because they couldn't get their meds. They
Mm-hmm.
gave it all. They gave it all to the preacher.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's my other frustration is that you have a church, which I'll be honest, I say this time and again on my show. I don't mind people having a spirituality. I don't mind people having a belief system. Like, as long as it's not
Neither.
infringing and imposing on other people, believe whatever you want to believe. Just keep it out of my schools
Mm-hmm.
and my community and my laws, and otherwise do what you want to do. But you
Right.
have preachers who are supposedly ordained that have no code of ethics that they have to follow. And you know why they don't have a code of ethics? Is because their morality changes based on what God tells them to do. There's not a
Yep.
strong objective morality. They do whatever God tells them to do. So there's no code of ethics that these individuals are being held accountable for. Now, if you had preachers with a code of ethics that had to come in before a board when they gave shitty advice and
Mm-hmm.
lost their ordainment, whatever ordainship, I don't know what the word is for that, lost their
Yeah.
ability to preach, I think that a
Yeah.
lot of atheists, especially, would feel better about it because there would be
Mm-hmm.
some sort of judge and jury that determines whether or not what they're doing is actually helping others or helping themselves.
Right. Yep.
Off
I
my
agree.
soapbox. Sorry, Dan. Get off my soapbox. But
That's
God damn.
that's all good. That's all good. Yeah, and not only that, but if you start to preach something that is against the certain theology or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
is held at a high esteem through that ministry
Mm-hmm.
organization, they could take away your degree and
Mm-hmm.
disassociate. And all those years that you spent, right,
Mm-hmm.
to get where you're at would
Yeah.
be taken away from you.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like they have the preachers in chains,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, to that they can't just do what they want. Like if they learn something that
Mm-hmm.
goes against the fold, it's like, oh, wait a minute, I could be in big trouble here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember hearing my pastor say that a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I heard that in the Baptist church as well, with preachers that were not allowed to say certain things or teach certain things as it went against what their organization believed or the doctrines that they pushed, despite them
Hmm.
learning things in seminary or learning things through their own research that went against the doctrine that they were teaching.
Hmm. Yep. But yeah, no, it's crazy. Another thing that was kind of the deconstructor of my charismatic was Kenneth Hagin himself. Before he died, he prophesied that there was going to be like certain years that were going to be bad, and certain years that were going to be really, really good, and even better the next year, and better the next year after that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the glory, God's glory and revival and all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and it just never happened that way at all. And I remember 2005 wasn't a great year, and so happened that 2005 wasn't the greatest year. But it was like one of those things where it's like, no, it's just these are just failed prophecies,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And like, okay, again, they're just kind of doing things like things are happening, like he's a false prophet at that point, you know. So I'm still continuing with the ministry up until 2011. I'm praise and worship leader at my church and a small church.
Mm-hmm.
This so-called prosperity message church, and this is a small church that just was always struggling.
Mm-hmm.
But I I I was in a one of the Holy Ghost meetings, right?
I don't
And
know what that
I
is, but I will trust your
oh the
judgment.
holy laughter, getting drunk in the spirit.
Okay.
Where we're so when this Holy Spirit fills you, and you can make some sexual innuendos on that one, but jokes, but but when the Holy Spirit is present in those meetings, all of a sudden people start laughing and stuff. Now, little side note, quick side note. Um, After leaving the charismatic church, I did a lot of research on the spiritual filling and everything like that, and came to find out that it was a stolen practice from the Hindus. And it's called the Kundalini.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you've heard that one. Okay.
I have, yeah. I've talked about how the Holy Ghost is a borrowed thing from previous, including the Hindus, but there's other belief systems and cultures that also share it. It's not unique to Christianity at all.
No, it's not. So, but what's great that I've been able to take away from this is that I can meditate very well. Mm-hmm. If I want to. I can get right into that place without a problem. Mm-hmm. Without the name of Jesus, without the Holy Spirit. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And get the same feelings and sensations. And I even did it while I was drunk. So I got drunk in spirit while I got drunk, for real. So much, it's even better. It's even better than the church. But anyway, we're in this meeting, right? And
yeah.
Everybody's laughing, and I was already starting to think skeptically on this at this point, because they're all those meetings are all the same. They hype them up, right? We're going to go into these meetings and we're going to have the best time in the spirit. We're going to go in further than we ever have before. We're going to be life changed. And, they say the exact same thing over and over and over again for every time they're about to have those meetings.
Yeah.
And I sit there and I'm like, we're all laughing. But then it's all of a sudden I stop and I look at everybody and they're just laughing. And it's like, what a bunch of spiritual gluttons. They just take this so-called filling from God, and they do nothing with it. Mm-hmm. They do nothing. They think they're being touched by God. When people got touched by God in the Bible, they did something with it. Mm-hmm. Why would God continue to touch everybody like this, and they don't do anything with it? They're going to go home tonight. Yeah. They're going to sleep like they sleep every other night, and they're going to wake up like they do every other day. Just like I do. And they might feel good for a while, and they might next Sunday morning they're coming in and it's a little bit of a hoot and holler, but not as intense. And then it's just going to be the same dead church as it was before. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking that this is from God talking to me, but it's just my skeptical thinking kicking in. This is just ridiculous. And it didn't last very long in that church after that. Because there's a situation with my used to be best friend, mm-hmm. who became the youth leader, and he started to date one of the youth girls secretively, mm-hmm. and so they ended up getting married.
Wow.
Yeah, he was 27, 28 at the time, and she was like 16.
And the church just turned a blind eye to this.
They did. I didn't know for sure. I definitely had my suspicions, and I threatened to call the police if I found out more information. So after that, everybody stopped talking to me. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, I was married at the time. My wife said, "Hey, you really need to figure out if we're going to be staying at this church or not. If we're staying here, I'm all in. But if we're not, we got to go." Like, all right. So kind of did a fairly quick prayer on it, actually. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I came to terms of, would I, and this is again, skeptical thinking, kick it in, critical thinking. Would I allow my daughter to go through the youth group here after what I know? I have a very good inkling that this is going on with this guy and this girl. I'm like, no, so I got to go. Very difficult thing. I grew up in this church, this church family, right? Pastor I have always considered my mentor,
Mm-hmm.
even though he didn't want to be my mentor
Mm-hmm.
and said that he didn't want to be my mentor.
So
But but
you mentioned in the last 5 minutes or so a couple of times of you praying or feeling as though God was speaking to you, and you've coupled that with being skeptical or having critical thinking kind of come in. I'm
mhm,
curious in both of these instances where you've essentially seen something that didn't quite jive right, whether it's in the prayer group or with this inappropriate relationship. Have you noticed now that you're away from Christianity that there's more of this union in your thoughts and you just recognize all of them as being your own? Or is there still that like feeling that God's speaking through your thoughts, or you have some sort of thoughts that are coming that don't feel like they're your own? Because I think that especially those that are young in the church, they try to distinguish between what's God and what's your thoughts, or they try to categorize them. But it sounds like you're having
yeah,
like this merging of the two, recognizing that they were all just your own judgment.
yeah. Well, at the time, I didn't know it was my judgment. As I said, I thought it was God.
Mm-hmm.
But so the way I view it now, I guess, uh, I was indoctrinated to be a certain way in church, but I wasn't like that for everything else. For everything else, I was very skeptical. I was very skeptical on everything else.
Interesting.
Very, when it came to my friends doing certain things, I was always the one like thinking logically. You know, hey, let's throw these firecrackers in the strip club and run off.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, we were in a real small town, so I don't think they had any security cameras. Otherwise, we would have gotten caught. But we're going driving down.
Now
Yeah,
everyone knows. You know who did it.
yeah, right. Driving when we're driving down the road, right, laughing, having a good time. My friend goes, "All right, man, let's go shoot off the rest of these fireworks at your place." I go, "No, you're not." He goes, "Why not? You're not going to shoot a bunch of flares up into the sky saying, 'Hey, here we are. We just did. We're the ones that just, you know, shot up the town with a bunch of fireworks.'"
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. So I was the only one kind of like thinking before we did certain things,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, so we're pattern recognitioners. Humans are pattern recognition. We
Mm-hmm.
see things and we can come to conclusions about, hey, I can't fix my car this way if I keep
Mm-hmm.
doing this exact same thing, so I need to do something different. Like we're like that. That's how we have survived through the centuries. The problem is that the investment in a community such as Christianity. So really quickly, because I don't want to take up too much more time, but think when you're talking to a Christian and it's so hard. Think about what they're going through, especially the indoctrinated. They've put their time, their energy, their money, their not just their time in the sense of Sunday morning. They think God is there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Demons are there all the time. In the secret, they have to watch what they're doing. Their eternal soul is at stake. That's a lot. That's a lot of pressure, to be on one person. And so, of course, they don't want to hear you. Of course, they don't want to hear reason
Yeah.
because if you're wrong, as they always say, if you're wrong and I'm right,
Mm-hmm.
I could end up in hell. That is something that we do need to show empathy towards, because that mindset is just that's rough. That's rough for even people who have deconstructed from the faith still deal with that concept. That's
Yeah.
one of the harder concepts to deconstruct. So I told my brother one time with this thinking and stuff. I was like, why is it when in life I'm allowed to think skeptically towards a lot of things because that keeps me going. That keeps me that gives me the ability to survive the next day. You know, if I'm going to buy a lawnmower or a vacuum or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna look into it. I'm gonna try to figure out if it's a good one or not. You know, and if it's I'll try to find out if it's a bad one. If it is a bad one, I'll find out bad reviews. Well, guess what? I'm going to start thinking skeptically on it.
Mm-hmm.
If a salesman comes to my door, starts talking to me about this vacuum they're selling, okay, I'll listen to him, but I also want to go find out from other people, should I buy this vacuum? Right?
Yeah.
Um, and so why is it that I'm allowed to use that and it's good? It's good for me to do that. That shows that you got some, you're using that thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to Christianity, I'm not allowed to do this. Why is it that God cannot handle this? Why is it that he can't stand before me with my questions? Why is it that it's so hard for him to answer those questions?
Yeah.
You know, if God is, it's because the, the excuse is always God's ways are not your ways. Well, why can't God figure out a way to explain it on my level?
And I'll give everyone a quick hint. The answer to that question is that the God of the Bible was created thousands of years ago by
Right.
men that are not as sophisticated as the men that live today. The leaps that we have made, I think, in logic and in science and in understanding the world we live in and stepping away from mythology and some of the things that really kept us anchored, I think, to our primitive brain are starting to deteriorate. And you have people out there challenging them now. And so whenever I think of people that are like, why can't I question God? Why does God not stand up to my scrutiny?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're essentially having people from antiquity and prior to that are having to face a modern man's scrutiny. And
Yeah.
they can't. And by God, I hope that we're evolving quick enough that they shouldn't be able to. Because if we're still
Yeah.
functioning as well as men were 3,000 years ago, then we're not
Mm-hmm.
making a lot of strides in the course of the human race.
Yeah, exactly. And when you read the Bible too, really quickly, you see that concept that it's not written for us.
No.
You know,
And you can see
it's
the
written for, yeah.
yeah, you can see the evolution of all these things we're talking about. You see the evolution of God and his morality. You see the evolution of hell. You see the evolution of Satan changing.
Yeah,
It,
Satan is big.
any,
Satan's a big one.
yeah, any of these things, you can break them down and see the people who wrote the first book did not believe the same thing that the people who wrote the last book.
Yes, and they're from all different generations, and you can see that they're from all different generations.
Mm-hmm.
So they might hold some basic foundations, but they're not saying we're not the same as Jesus' disciples
Mm-hmm.
and what they were going through back then. They would if they were here right now, they'd freak the fuck out
Yeah. Well,
because
Jesus wouldn't even.
they wouldn't know what to do with all this.
If Jesus did exist, he wouldn't even understand what modern Christians are preaching.
No,
He would not understand their
no,
concept of hell or of Satan,
yeah,
or the apocalypse that they're talking about. And that I think is what is most astounding to me when you remember that Jesus was a Jew from Jewish times, who was trying to uphold laws from the Old
hmm
Testament.
yeah,
He does not know what Paul, who never met him, is even talking about in the New Testament. Those concepts are
hmm
influenced by Greco-Roman culture. Jesus doesn't
yeah,
know that.
yeah. So
Anyway,
jumping ahead a little bit here, so I know we're probably getting close to time, but um, I and this is kind of going off of what you just said too. Uh, have deconstructed from charismatic. That was a big one. And that was a hard one
mm-hmm.
because essentially, when you deconstruct from one denomination and you go on to another one, that's a difficult process because now you're kind of sitting there like, I was worshiping this God before,
Mm-hmm.
and now the definition has changed with God, and now I'm worshiping this God.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I deal with that? Because with this God, I went through the repentance,
Mm-hmm.
I went through the salvation message, all that stuff, and the right one that this one believes it,
Mm-hmm.
that this one believes it. Even though there was a bunch of messiness around that, I knew enough to read the Bible to understand it. that I fit the mold of an evangelical
Yeah.
that I went on to. And I'm sitting there like, man, how do I see this? Like, yeah, I was saved, but the definition of God also has changed now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to shape and mold it. And that was like, so I left Charismatic when I was 29 to 30. I was probably deconstructing more so from 25 there to, right around there.
Yeah.
I'm married. I am working in the ministry at a homeless shelter. And I've, since I left Charismatic, I'm no longer waiting on Genie, to do something. I am making it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am kind of going up the ranks, working in the kitchen to working downstairs at the front desk.
Mm-hmm.
Then I become a case manager in the shelter,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm teaching uh, Bible studies, and I'm teaching the history of Bible study. And as I'm teaching the history of Bible studies, I'm finding out these little things here and there of,
Yeah.
oh, this is not really for us today. This was really for them, and kind of going, I did the Bible project a lot with those Bible studies,
Mm-hmm.
and they're really good. You know, they're not great, but they're better than a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And and kind of hearing all the differences and how you know the evolution of the history of Judaism into Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really hit home for me was, why is it that Christians are not allowed to really talk with atheists? That was kind of a big one,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And why is this group of people so demonized
Mm-hmm.
in the church? That was a big thing. And so I decided, okay, you know what? Uh, let me backtrack a little bit more. Actually, I'm kind of skipping
I
ahead.
was like, and then Dan talked to an atheist, and boom, we got him. No, I'm just.
It was very, it's yeah. I did start studying
Yeah.
the arguments. Well, I think it's important for me to kind of backtrack. Me and my wife, we're foster and adopted, parents, and we started with this as spiritual. We're doing God's will
Mm-hmm.
to save these kids, kind of thing,
Yep. Yep.
and to love them. And that shortly not it didn't last very long. It became a thing where we were like, okay, no, this is something that we should do because it's right,
Mm-hmm.
because it's right to do. Um, and we adopted a few kids, and we adopted our son, and he had a sister. So my wife, I should say, my wife fought very hard to get her into our house, and she had a lot of medical issues. I was very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
I was hesitant at first. I'm always hesitant on so many things, but um, we got her into our house, and she had some major medical issues. She had a trach, she had G2, um, probably weakened immune system. She had some significant issues with muscle, firing of the muscles on her
Yeah.
legs, stuff like that. So, but as she, lived in her house, she started to get better. Um, she eventually got the trach taken out, the G tube.
Wow.
Started to stand, and she had a walker and everything, and all these, it's just progressing. Starts going to school, and one week, this one week she gets sick, and we've seen her sick before, and when she gets sick, it's like, okay, we know when she's bad. She didn't look bad. She didn't look too bad, but she stayed home a few days
Mm-hmm.
and hung out with her that day. And she that the afternoon she ate a salad with us. She's like, three and a half years old, eating a salad with us. And that that night she went to bed. I went to her door, was listening for coughs, stuff like that. And then went to bed, woke up the next morning, she had passed. And she had passed in her sleep. And we had later on found out that she had like pneumonia. It was probably walking pneumonia, possibly.
Yeah.
And I would assume walking pneumonia because that's where you kind of don't know that you have it when you have it.
Mm-hmm.
She also had strep throat and this other thing. It starts with an R, but it heightens the strep throat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she she passed in her sleep, and I found her that morning, and that was a big step, right, for me in figuring this out. God's called us to do this, and I understand that there's no guarantee that our kids are going to make it and not make it, but why this way? She was doing better, like she was getting better, like all her medical conditions were,
Mm-hmm.
not all of them, but a lot of the major ones were starting to get better. She was active, she was fun, great person, and it was one of those things where it's just like, yeah, I get it that she had some issues, but why is it that she was getting better and this happened?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
I know it's been a while since this has occurred, but I imagine the trying to process that grief of that loss at the time and recognizing not only what the church would tell you about how to process that grief, but trying to like just go through every Bible story that you've heard and how you're
mm,
supposed to clutch on to God and step into God and these types of things, despite this overwhelming sense of loss when you feel as though
yeah,
you're doing everything you're called to do and you still lose it. Can you talk about what
right.
that was like in trying to find that balance and that? I mean,
Yeah.
we as humans seek meaning. How do you find meaning when this has happened?
Yeah, so right away, like, not right away. A couple days after, yeah, I'm trying to figure this out. You know, uh, I'm looking at Job, right? That's just the kind of the go-to.
Yeah,
Everybody knows Job.
yep.
Job lost his kids and stuff, and there's no answers there, right? No real answers. Um, Job's just kind of told to shut up, really, by God. Why are you bothering me, basically?
Mm-hmm.
And internally, I'm thinking that, but at the same time, I'm trying to clutch to something, like, um, I kind of go towards other teachers and somebody. I like this one, look at Ruth and Naomi, right?
Mm-hmm.
She changes her name to Mara, right? And what that means is I'm bitter at the Lord for what He has done.
Mm-hmm.
She changes her name to that. When she goes to her community, she doesn't get scolded for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't get talked down or looked upon because she's changed her name to that. For Christians nowadays, they would definitely look down upon something like that. They wouldn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, there's nothing much. Doesn't there's not much to say. God will turn your mourning into joy. Well, you know, why would I want that? And so a Christian hears that right now and may think, well, what? Why would I want my mourning, my grief for my daughter to go away.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the goal. It's not. And so there's this misconception that that's somehow the goal, to try to get into more of a stable place with your grief or something like that. I don't want anybody to take my grief away. I don't want anybody to take my mourning or any of that away from me. But I'll tell you why. Because my grief is a reminder of my connection with my daughter,
Yeah, it's a reflection
of
of
how
your
much.
love.
Exactly, and that connection that we had, uh, that it was that strong. And why, as a dad, would I want somebody to take that away from me? It's good for me to grieve. And at the time when I was still a Christian, I would say, yeah, because God had created this, so it's a natural thing for me to grieve,
Mm-hmm.
and so I should be allowed to, without shame, without having to seek anything, but know that this is a natural response to something that's happened. And
Mm-hmm.
many times, and so many people try to run from that because they think for some reason it's the bad guy,
Mm-hmm.
grief it, and you know, uh, grief is what I call my dark companion when it does come,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because I allow it to come. I don't fight it away. Okay, friend, we will sit together here,
Yeah.
you know. And that was a rough year. My dad passed away about 6 months after her death, and then had a guy who was on the program that I was helping get through the program. He passed away in the same year, so 2000 it was 2017. It's a very rough year, but I fell out of love with God in that time. I found myself, okay, when am I gonna have that feeling for God again?
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't fall out of love with God when I deconstructed from charismatic. I still love God very much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, yeah, during that time, when I was evangelist, yeah, there was times I was like, is God real or not? Because of course you're going to question.
Mm-hmm.
And I, uh, I found myself in a place where I was like, okay, I don't love God. I have to be truthful about this. I'm not going to lie, because if God is real, He knows that I'm lying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in love with you, but I'm going to trust you, despite what I'm going through right now. I'm going to trust you, hoping that something's going to happen down the road. Me and my wife are, both kind of saying that, together. We're both kind of like, yeah, just, what, I have no idea what God has planned. Like, does He have something planned? I don't know. We have no clue what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And during our time where, we're grieving, right, with the and we're kind of waiting on the church. And don't get me wrong, there's some people that stepped in. Okay, so when I say this, there's still people within, the church that do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many people that just say the most inappropriate things, like, "Oh, she's no longer suffering." Well, she wasn't suffering. What? She was getting better. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like she was. It wasn't like she was laying in the hospital the whole time. She was in our care.
Mm-hmm.
She's living at the house with us. She was going to school. you know, uh, oh, God wanted her for an angel. Or she's with Jesus now. And I'm just thinking, man, this is just so insulting. Like, most of these people know me, and they know my wife. They know that we've been in church our whole life. We know all this. We know all those scriptures. No, we're not stupid. Like you guys are treating us like we're idiots. Like, we don't, like, this is something new. You know, I don't care if she's with God right now. I want her here with me.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't do anything for me. Yeah, she's okay. she's in a safe place with God. Well, she was in a safe place with me and my wife. Things were going good.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing all the right things. So it's definitely one of those things where it's just like, um, and I understand that people that would be looking at me and thinking like, oh, no wonder he deconstructed from the faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's a valid point to that, I think, because I've gone through what I've gone through. It's not just my daughter, but I've told those same people, look, I've I know that the Bible says that we are going to go through bad times. And so I've gone through bad times before, and yes, this is the most challenging thing I've ever gone through, for at least at that time. But I I knew that my faith was not based upon worldly experiences.
Yeah.
That is not my foundation. And so since it was not my foundation was not rocked. My relationship with God was rocked.
Yeah. If you
That's a bit different.
if you don't mind, I want to reframe a little bit and just let me know if I'm correct in this as you kind of explore this more. Because it
Mhm.
sounds as though you have these losses, these incredible losses of your daughter and your father and the individual that you were working with within the church. And you have been very clear that you were looking to God for hope during that. You didn't feel love towards
Yeah.
him, but you didn't leave God. Your wife was standing
No.
by you in that journey, and you guys essentially trying to remain devout, looking
Mhm.
for essentially the dawn through the storm and continuing to cling to that faith that something was coming and that
Mhm.
something positive would come from this heartbreak that had occurred. And it was through, and this is where I want your clarification, you then seen, for lack of a better word, the indoctrinated response of the
Yeah.
congregation being presented to you again and again and again that kind of, it's not as much that it rubbed you the wrong way, but it kind of shined a light on this um, realization or this truth that your rationale for trying to deal with the grief, your rationale for trying to deal with this trauma that I'm occurring, does not match up to what is actually occurring. It's like a band aid that you're putting over the pain that I'm experiencing without really understanding like the fullness of what this is, what it is that I'm going through. It's almost like you're just like washing it away. You're just washing away this pain and this suffering that I'm
Okay.
experiencing with this concept of God that no
Mhm.
longer is reconciling with what it is that I'm going through.
Well, when it came, yeah. So it's okay. So when you boil it down, right? I'm not just dealing with the death of my daughter. I'm dealing with the death of my relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not in it for love. I'm in it to trust.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in it because it's the right thing to do. As far as my Christian upbringing and what I understand of the scriptures,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. I'm not doing it out of a loving thing. I'm angry at God.
Mm-hmm.
I at this point I'm Mara.
Mm-hmm.
I am bitter at God, but I'm in the community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm still in ministry. I am still preaching to the homeless. I'm still doing Bible studies. You know, I'm still praise and worshiping that God
Yeah.
while I feel a sense of anger towards Him.
Yeah. I'm still doing your
Singing
work
to Him.
despite the emotions that I'm feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, for did that for about 4 years, 3.5 years, 4 years, somewhere around there. So I am trying to figure this all out, right? Um, I'm I'm not happy with the church. I'm not happy with religion. I'm not happy with some of the things I'm seeing in the homeless shelter and how people are being treated. And I get to a point. I found myself. That is when Trump got into office. So I don't want to get too political, but man, Christians really started to show their true color when he came in. And I was like, I don't even know, I don't even want to be a part of this community.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is not my heart. You know, this is not who I am and what I signed up for. Um, this entitlement, this, whatever this is, it's not me. And I got to a point where I didn't even call myself a Christian anymore. I started to call myself a follower of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it was like, well, what else do I call myself without it being like too cultish or something?
Mm-hmm.
like Daniel's doing his own thing and starting his own cult or something. And I so coming to the end of my ministry, right? I am still studying the word, still diving deep to trying to find some meaning, some understanding, and I'm getting irked and about some of the Christian concepts, especially towards atheists. And I'm like, I want to be able to talk to them and
Mm-hmm.
see what they have to say because we have to stand and give an account. So it's wrong for them to be selling us to stay away from atheists.
Mm-hmm.
So I started watching videos and listening to some debates, and I'm like, there's a lot of good arguments being brought up here,
Mm-hmm.
and it's you know, and then I come across the atheist experience with Matt Dillahunty and
Yeah.
the crew, and man, I was like, this is a call-in show so Christians can talk with atheists. And I was like, every time they're just mopping the floor with these Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And like these Christians don't know how to give an account for these simple beliefs, you know? And some of them have a few good arguments here and there. But when it comes down to it, they're all falling short of an atheist. And so that didn't necessarily right away stop me, but when I started seeing more contradictions in the Bible, actually,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the story of Judas, and Matthew, and the story of Judas and Acts, and how they didn't line up.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that's the one that was kind of that story. I was like, well, that's clear, a very clear contradiction, more clear than any other thing that I've
Mm-hmm.
come across. I go, oh, okay. Well, I'm done. Just
So
like that.
it sound
Wasn't this great ceremony? Light from the heavens and like fall down. I simply, okay, got up and had the realization that I'm an atheist while working in the ministry now.
yeah. It's interesting because I say this often and frequently that if God wanted to save me, he would have done it when I was a devout Christian, more devout than I could be, where I was pulling the punches, doing the work, had the
Mm,
faith, nothing was breaking me, despite what was going on or what suffering I was experiencing. If there was a time to take me and make sure I was going to make my way into heaven, that was the time. Because I couldn't have been more fanatical and devout than I was when I was doing that work regularly, despite the suffering I was going through. So to now be
yeah.
on the other side of that and to be an atheist and not have that connection with a divine creator that or the Christian God is shocking to me because it means, well, you must not have really wanted me if you do exist. And hearing your story, it makes me very curious because your story very much is, I think, a story of healing. I think that's what people are going to hear is your
Mm,
journey to find healing after the suffering you went through. And you looked for that in religion, and religion was bringing you more suffering. And the harder that you looked for something, the pillars started crumbling around you. That was your
hmm
faith in trying to uphold that. Have you found healing outside of religion? Have you found a way to cope with the deaths that you experienced, to cope with, I guess, the world around you in finding
hmm
meaning and purpose outside of living every moment for the Christian God? or this concept of
So
it?
I think that's an ever developing concept and idea of, understanding our place in this world. And so right now, I think, with it just being 2 years in of being an atheist, um, I kind of have the basic concepts of atheists of that this life is the life that we have now, and we don't get a second chance. And so since we don't get a second chance, let's make it count. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we don't have enough proof. We don't have enough evidence yet that there's other worlds out there in this vast,
Mm-hmm.
huge universe. So if this little dot compared to the speck of sand, called Earth, is just this incredible thing that we get to experience. Well, yeah, let's enjoy it. I think that mindset, it can be so much better than the one of Christianity. As far as like my grief and finding the healing within the grief, yeah, that came while I was a Christian, but it didn't come through Christian concepts. It came through mental health, doing healthy practices,
Mm-hmm.
accepting that grief. One thing I was taught about anxiety that I knew about before my daughter passed was that this person who dealt with anxiety kind of was able to cope with it better when they accepted it. And so instead of running from the anxiety, Bill Hader had the same thing too just
Mm-hmm.
recently in one of his videos. Said he, before he went on SNL, to
Mm-hmm.
do the show every night, Saturday night, he was super anxious.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he always imagined this kind of like monster, trying to attack him while he was doing the skits. And it was always very, very difficult for him to maintain and not have a panic attack. But he said he, eventually got to a place where he accepted it and said, okay, let's just have you on my shoulder while we do these skits,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so I found myself, you know, about to teach Bible study, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm praying because the grief is so strong. And I'm about to have a panic attack. This is like 10 minutes before everybody starts coming into my class. And I just kind of I remember that teaching of accepting the anxiety. And so I imagine it being this dark cloud, like, oh, not quite like a storm because there's no light. It's just this dark black cloud, and it's just coming towards me. Um, and I just allow it to come and just be with me. And so that was kind of this big this big immersement of grief. And I obviously I was crying a bit, but then I because I allowed it, I was able to continue to do my class that night.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but yeah, it's I've been very fortunate. At the same time, my wife deconstructed with me on her own terms. It wasn't like this. Hey, we're going to deconstruct
Yeah.
from Christianity together,
Yep.
and it's going to be a lot of fun. It was. We just so happened to both be kind of on the same page. I think she. I think she. I think she has a little more spirituality
Mm-hmm.
around hers than I do. I'm not against spirituality necessarily, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, because I experienced what we talked about demons at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
I don't because of that experience, and I think that's okay. You know, it's one of those things where if there's a spiritual realm, and if it needs to present itself towards to me, then it will. But I'm not seeking it. I'm not looking for it. You know, I find fulfillment in just everyday life and what I'm doing now.
That is wonderful to
You know,
hear, and I appreciate you sharing that much. And I'm glad to hear that you and your wife are kind of walking in tandem and finding that meaning and that purpose together. If you'll allow me, I'd like to ask one more question. You can tell me if this one's not appropriate. But you mentioned your daughter having the brother.
Yeah.
How's he handled it, managed it, and found, I guess, some recompense in the death of
So
his sister?
we didn't really so we were not like with our kids super strong with Christianity. It
Mm-hmm.
was there, but it wasn't super strong because we didn't like certain concepts, and with their mental health, it wasn't like with me and with
Mm-hmm.
my wife who grew up in the church. And we do have like our certain mental health issues, but they're they're not as hard as our kids, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one of those things where we want kind of presented the gospel in some way, but we didn't like force it at either.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when my daughter passed, she was 3. And I believe he was around 5 at the time. So he kind of remembers it. He kind of doesn't. He misses her. We do certain things though we try to honor her, and we have made memorial gardens, and we try to make a pretty big memorial garden.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're going to be doing here. At the house too, is working on building gardens and stuff like that. Um, he, I think it was very hard on him. Rightfully so. I think he wanted to not talk about it. So, but I think with time, he's gotten the concept of death. I think he's starting to understand, why why we're in a place where we, you know, honor people after they pass. That's what we do. And I've often say that, with certain people, because, the questions come up to me like, hey, how do you keep going? You know, she was your little girl, and,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, when you're able to have that bond with a child, that the way we did, it's very hard, very difficult to keep going. And I have that understanding. What I don't understand, really quick, it's my ADHD kicking in. What I don't understand is how Christians can say that they love God after that. I don't get that concept, how they can still love God. But anyway, what I was trying to say was, where was I at? Sorry,
You're
just
okay.
lost my train of thought. But
Honoring the memory of those that have passed and taking time to make
yeah,
sure you do.
yep. So they ask, how do you keep going? And I say, I if I'm able to honor my daughter with my life, that's a good way to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're able to honor your loved ones with the life that you have, and if this is the only life you have, why not? Why not use it in a way to honor those who have passed? So that you're able to keep going. Because if it, when you boil that down of your relationship with your loved ones, that's what they would want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I would want you to keep going, you know? And so allow yourself, I say, allow yourself to grieve well. It's okay to grieve well. Continue to grieve.
Mm-hmm.
Continue to honor your loved ones as they've gone on, and you're still here. Use the life that you have to honor them in some way, some form, some fashion.
I
It
absolutely
doesn't
love
have
that
to.
message, Dan.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Does
that's probably a good spot to end it. Final thought. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. No, I was just gonna say, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a big elaborate thing either. It can be it can just be small things, the little things you do in life. I'm doing this little thing, as I'm doing it in honor of my, loved one.
Yeah, I absolutely love that idea. Upholding the memory of the loved one. I've done a lot of grief therapy with families who have lost loved ones while I was working for the military and also in practice as a therapist. And it sounds like you're doing all the right things in managing grief and teaching your son
Yeah.
handle grief
Thank you.
as well. So it's
Thank you.
heartwarming.
I
So,
didn't even I didn't go through counseling either. I should have, but
well, it sounds like you found your way regardless.
well, there's still things I need to address. I'm actually seeking counsel now, but that's for more for my ADHD. Yeah, that's a whole other story.
A story for another time. Well, Dan, let folks know where can they find you, where can they connect with you if they're interested in hearing more of your story or getting some
Yep.
feedback on how to handle deconstruction.
So deconstruction, one thing that I'd love to put this one thing out. If you find yourself questioning the faith and everything, and you do find yourself deconstructing, where you no longer a Christian, uh, do not put it on Facebook as your status. I'm no longer a Christian. Be safe. It's serious. Be
Mm-hmm.
safe. Because one thing I didn't say in this is that I didn't tell everyone at work in my ministry, hey, I'm an atheist now. I was a secret atheist for 7 months and still preaching the gospel, still praise and worshiping. You know, I had to keep myself safe. I had to keep my family safe, make sure that we were in a good position to move on. Play chess. Play chess. Be strategic. Don't just come out and say it. Act. You've been, Christians are good actors.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be good. So they have to act like they're good, even though they want to do the bad thing, right? Um, just take those concepts, and that's what I did. I took the concepts, I made them work for me for that 7 months, even though it was very difficult, very hard. It feels very disingenuous. You feel like you're lying, and that's again the sin concept of you're lying makes you feel bad. Oh, I gotta repent. I gotta do right. Just keep yourself safe until you're able to do it, because the one that you think that you love, uh, that's that has been your mentor or whatever, they might turn their back on you. So put yourself in a safe space, a safe situation, where if things go bad, if you want to tell them, okay, but do it in the right way,
Mm-hmm.
where you're safe enough to not get hurt. If you're gonna do it in public. That's where I've heard of these Christian interventions too, where the community found out, the church community found out that the person became an atheist,
This
and
is
then they,
a whole trail that we could go down for the dangers that you're talking about. And I imagine folks
yeah,
that are hearing what you're saying goes, man, that sounds really disingenuous. Like, what do you mean keep yourself safe? They're Christians. Like, what are you talking about? No, you'll have
yeah,
surprise interventions at your house. You'll have
yep,
people doing prayer circles around you. I know individuals that have had their tires slashed, that they've had people stalking them, that they've had
mm-hmm.
cameras put up in their homes to watch them. I know it sounds insane, but I have seen churches and church communities go to full extents to shame and guilt individuals to keep them into the church when they realize that they are seeking outside sources for information or considering not being in the Christian church. So when you're saying be safe, for some people that may sound
Yep,
insane and that may not necessarily fit with their worldview and what they would expect. But depending on the church that you're in and the community that you're in, it can be very dangerous for some to leave.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that'd be my ending. The thing that I definitely want to end on, and if you want to find me, I am on TikTok mainly. And that would be my name is Heretical Dan, and check me out there. I definitely have more of a community over there, and like to DM and talk with people and that sort of thing. So yeah, have a lot more stuff to talk about there.
All right. I appreciate it, Dan. Thank you again for joining us for this extended version. You guys are getting a lot of information all at once.
Josh, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thanks all of you for joining us again here on Gods of Tomorrow. Go home, hug your loved ones. Hope that you guys go out and really be the best versions of yourselves. Let that be your goal. Go out there and do well for the world. Leave it in a better state than we entered it. And as always, do what the fuck you will.